Okay, so last week we introduced IPA, talked about consonants, talked about kind of the three main characteristics that we use to distinguish between consonants, which is voicing, are your vocal folds vibrating or not, and then place of articulation, where in your mouth are your articulators coming together to shape that sound, and then manner of articulation, which was basically how much constriction is there, going from a complete stoppage of air with a stop or a plosive, all the way to a glide or a vowel where there's very little constriction of the air. So again, this is the official IPA chart. And we looked at a lot of these symbols last time. And I put them on this chart where I have the manners in a slightly different order. On the IPA chart, they're not strictly from most constriction to least constriction. Here they are. So a PDF file with this, it's blank. It won't have my symbols filled in, but with this order of the manner of articulations is on the Dropbox. And if you have questions about vowel or consonants from last time, we can go over those at the end. But like Catherine said, today we're going to talk about vowels. So on the official IPA chart, we have a vowel chart. It looks like this. Let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. So this is what the official IPA vowel chart looks like. There are quite a few vowel symbols on here, and not all of them are useful. So we're going to try to cover the most useful ones today. Some of them you can kind of just forget about. But when we talk about vowels, we don't use the same terms that we use to talk about consonants. For consonants, we mostly use voicing, place of articulation, manner of articulation. For vowels, they're all articulated in the same area of the mouth, and which vowel it is depends on how your tongue is kind of bunching up and in what area. So the characteristics that we use to talk about vowels have to do with the position of your tongue in kind of the central area of your mouth, which is where your tongue is when you're making a vowel sound. So the labels front, central, and back refer to, is your tongue more bunched up towards your hard palate? So where we talked about a palatal place of articulation, that's what we mean by front. So if you say an E vowel, and then you say a Y sound, E, Y, your tongue's in the exact same place when you make those two sounds. Y is a palatal glide, it's a consonant, and E is what we call a front vowel. So the front refers to where your hard palate is, not the front of your mouth, but the front of the area where your tongue moves around when you're making vowel sounds. And then central would be a little further back than that. And back would be, if you make an oo vowel, oo, and you feel where your tongue is kind of bunched up towards the back, it's closer to like your velum, uvula area, more close to your velum. So that's kind of in between your hard palate and your velum is kind of the area where your tongue moves around when you're making different vowels. So that's what we mean when we say front, central, and back. And then on the official IPA chart, you have close versus open. So that refers to how close to the roof of your mouth your tongue is when you're making that vowel sound. So again, if you say E, your tongue is up pretty high. If you say Ah, your tongue is down pretty low. So that is the scale in between. You'll also see that particular scale referred to as high, mid, and low. So you might see a vowel referred to as a close vowel, or you might see it referred to as a high vowel. Those are equivalent. Open is equivalent to low. They're both referring to how high is your tongue in your mouth when you make that particular vowel. The other major characteristic we talk about for vowels is whether it's rounded or unrounded, and that refers to what your lips are doing when you are making that vowel. So if you make an E vowel, E, you can do that while smiling, E, right? Your lips are not rounded. They're quite flat. When you make an oo vowel, your lips are rounded. Oo. So oo is an example of a rounded vowel. E is an example of an unrounded vowel. And most tongue positions for a vowel, you can have a rounded and an unrounded vowel where your tongue stays in the same position. So for example, if you say E and then you just make your lips round but keep your tongue in the exact same place, you say Ü, right? This is a vowel that comes out in French and German, and you've probably had to sing it before, right? That is a rounded high front or close front vowel. Now, another characteristic that you might see referred to for vowels is ATR. That refers to essentially something that your tongue root is doing, so down, like way down in your throat at the base of your tongue. And in vowel naming systems where they use high, mid, and low, you'll generally see ATR used as well. In vowel systems that use close and open, you'll generally just have smaller divisions, like we have close mid and open mid, and this vowel right here would be called near close because it's in between close and close mid. So in this system, you just divide up the tongue height descriptions into smaller groups. In this system, when you use high, mid, and low, instead of having like near high, you usually use ATR as a different description. So you may see both of these systems used depending on who is describing the vowel. This is a more pure phonetic system. This is a system that we use in phonology. So like if you look up the sounds of a language on Wikipedia, you'll often see this system used because usually they're talking about the phonology of the language. So just so you're familiar with those two sets of labels. And then it's not labeled on the actual IPA chart, but the convention, like with voicing in the consonant chart, we have unrounded vowels on the left side and rounded vowels on the right side. So the high front or close front vowel that we were talking about, E, is right here with the letter I as the symbol we used for that. The rounded version is right here. It's a lowercase y. So this is E and this is Ü. If we go to our close back or high back vowels, we have U. That one's rounded, so it falls on the right side of the line. We use the U symbol to represent the U vowel. If you make that one unrounded, so you make an U and then you just smile, keep your tongue in the exact same place and say it again, you say U. Right? So this is the symbol we use for that vowel, U. This shows up in Mandarin, for example. Some of you have tried to sing this vowel before in previous songs. And again, your tongue is in the exact same place as it would be for an U, but your lips are not rounded, and that's the symbol that we use. So let's go over some of the most common vowel symbols that you might want to use to represent different vowels. Now, before we do that, you have to understand that vowels, this is going to sound silly, vowels are not the same as consonants. With consonants, there's generally, if you're making a bilabial stop, everyone's going to make it in the same way, right? Once you know how you're supposed to make it, it's going to sound pretty much the same from everybody. Vowels are different. You can think of this entire vowel chart as a continuum. So even though we've identified particular points on it and we've given those points a symbol to represent that vowel, really that symbol represents kind of a cluster of possible ways of pronouncing that vowel that are slightly different. So some of the vowel differences that you may want to represent aren't going to be as easy as just choosing a different vowel symbol. So for example, one of the German vowels we were just talking about doesn't really have a good symbol representation on this chart. That's where what's called diacritics can come in handy. So these are extra symbols that you can add around a main symbol to tell you that you're slightly changing the pronunciation in some way. Let me see. Yeah. So this box down here on the IPA chart is called Diacritics. And there's a whole bunch of different ones, but some that might be helpful. Let's see, where are they? Yeah. So here, these two you can use for something that is raised or lowered. So, for example, in the German, when Catherine is saying it's a really closed A vowel, like I said, there's not really a different symbol we can use to represent that, but we can take, it's actually this vowel. So this vowel would normally represent the A, right? A. That's a little more open than what we want for German. So if you close it or raise it a little bit, A, you're not all the way to an I vowel, that's a different symbol, but you're a little bit more raised than the prototypical A vowel. So you can use these raised and lowered diacritics to help you remember that this is a little bit more closed or more raised, or it's a little bit more open or lowered than the actual symbol represents. Because if you take the phonetics class, you learn the vowel sound that's kind of at the center of the cluster that symbol represents. So this symbol represents the center of that cluster, and that's A, but that's not really the sound that we want. So sometimes you may have to use diacritics, or you can invent your own, but there are ones here if you'd like to use them to kind of alter how you are pronouncing that particular vowel. So let me zoom out just a little bit more so you can actually see the whole chart. There we go. That's mostly good. Okay, so starting up here, the two vowels that we've already talked about, we have E represented with the I, and then U, which is just the rounded version of that vowel. The minus ATR, or the slightly lower and slightly more central versions of these two, are I. So you have E and then I. And I we represent with a small capital I. And then the rounded version of that, so if you make an I vowel and then you round your lips, you have I as opposed to U, I, U. That is a small capital Y. And I like to put bars on it as well because I have trouble distinguishing for myself. between the lowercase y and the small capital Y. So whatever helps you. But on the official IPA chart, it's a little bit easier because they are typed. So that's these two vowels and these two vowels. Then moving down, still in the front vowels. So our mid-front vowels, we have A, which I said is represented with the letter E symbol. And the rounded version of that is Ö. So A, Ö. And that, we use this O with a slash through it. This vowel, I believe this does show up in German. I don't remember if this one shows up in French or just the minus ATR one. So the minus ATR, or if you're using this system, we're now into the open mid front vowels. We have eh. This is a symbol that Catherine was mentioning earlier. Looks like a backwards 3. So if you say this is a, this is eh. So just slightly more open. And then we have the rounded version of that. So if you say eh and then round your lips, you get eh. And that is, this is an O and an E connected to each other. Eh, eh. This one shows up in French a lot. Actually, I'm pretty sure both of these show up in French, and they're very hard to distinguish, especially if you're an English speaker, because we don't have any front rounded vowels in English. All of our rounded vowels are back vowels, so when we hear things that are rounded, we just assume that they're back vowels when they are not. Then getting into the low front vowels, we have ah, and this we represent with an A and an E that are kind of connected. I always have trouble drawing this so that it's different from the OE. You can just draw them really close together. They don't have to actually be connected, but that's the vowel ah. There is not technically a rounded version of that vowel. This is not a very common vowel. We have it in English, but it doesn't show up in a lot of languages, and there isn't really a rounded version of it. And then finally we have ah. Gotta be careful which one I draw here. So this ah, really front ah, would be what we call a bright ah vowel. So when Catherine asks you for bright ah, that just means your tongue is really open because it's a low or open vowel, but it's bunched up more forward than back. So we use kind of the typeset ah to represent that. Then, now, if you go on and take pure linguistics classes, we don't usually differentiate between front and central pronunciations of this vowel. So if you go and look up phonologies, sound systems, sounds that are in different languages, you'll often see that vowel put as a central vowel. And in reality, when we make the ah vowel in English, it is fairly central. Your tongue's just kind of right in the middle of your mouth, but there's not a separate symbol for that. So this can represent either the front vowel or the central vowel. There's not a huge amount of difference between them. We do have a separate symbol for the back one. So let's switch over to the back vowels now. We already talked about oo, which is our high or close back rounded vowel, and then we have the unrounded version, oo. Then moving down again, we have the minus ATR in this system, or we have the near near close, near back vowel, and this one also, Catherine reference, this is the vowel. It looks like an upside down horseshoe. Or just a regular horseshoe. I guess horseshoes don't really have a right side up and upside down. Or an upside down omega, I think. So this, like Catherine said, this is the vowel you'd get in like book. It's not quite an oo, it's a little bit more open and a little different. That's that vowel. Then we have, there is no unrounded version of that vowel either. There's not a symbol for that. Then moving down into our mid vowels here, we have O, and that is represented with the letter O. We do have an unrounded version of this, so if you make an O and you smile, then you get, hold on, let me make sure I'm giving you the right symbol. There are many different ways to describe this symbol. You could call it a palm tree, I've heard. I forget what Rick says. He might call it the palm tree. Sometimes I think it looks like a flying bird. I don't know. It's a weird symbol. Whatever helps you remember it. But that is the unrounded version of O. So you go O and then you smile, O. Different than oo, because it's a mid-vowel. Your tongue's a little bit lower. Then we have O, Ah. So this is what you might hear Catherine call an open O. All right, so your mouth is slightly more open, or your tongue is slightly lower, but we're still in the mid-vowel territory. On the IPA chart, this would be an open mid-vowel. So, say backward C, or literally an open O. And there is a unrounded version of this vowel. So if you go ah, ah, that is the caret. Sometimes you will see this symbol represented as a central vowel as well. It's actually a different vowel. We use it to represent the vowel, which we'll do a couple of the central vowel symbols in just a second. There's only a few central vowel symbols that we use. So sometimes this is used to represent the back unrounded version of the ah, so ah. Sometimes it's used to represent the which is the same, it's just more central. Again, depending on who is writing about these vowels and what system they're using, this could represent two slightly different vowels. They're almost the same, but they're slightly different. For your purposes, you're probably not ever going to be making that particular distinction. There's not a lot of languages that actually have this back version of the vowel. So you're not likely to be using it to represent that anyway. Then we get into our low back vowel, and this one is unrounded. So the ah, the really far back ah, as opposed to the ah, that's forward, ah, ah. Further back is the handwritten A versus, oops, sorry, you couldn't see that, the handwritten A versus the typeset kind of A. That was the front or the central vowel. There is a rounded version of this, and it's just that, but flipped upside down. I'm really bad at drawing it. So that would be ah if you're really rounding Again, that's not a symbol that you're likely to use super often. You're most likely to use this versus this to differentiate between, is it supposed to be further back or is it supposed to be further forward? The only central vowel symbols that you're probably going to use are the some of the mid-central vowels. You have probably seen this one. Well, you may have seen this one. You've definitely heard of this one. This upside down E is called a schwa. And it's basically if you hold your mouth in a very neutral position, without really opening your mouth a whole lot, that's a schwa. We use it in English a ton. It's not an official English vowel, but basically any unstressed syllable will normally be pronounced with this vowel. We just kind of take all of our other vowels and mush them into the center of the vowel chart if they're not in a stressed syllable. So you actually say this vowel a whole lot, even though you don't realize it. The other symbol you might use is the other symbol we have that for the vowel that this symbol is sometimes used for, and that's the vowel. And so that one is just a regular 3, but small. And then again, like I said, this is sometimes used to represent a central ah sound as well. Basically, the other vowels that are in here you probably won't use so much, so I wouldn't worry about learning them all. Occasionally, these ones will show up, the barred I and the barred U. So this is basically if you make an E vowel and you just kind of move it backwards a little bit, but not so far back that you get the U vowel, kind of E. That may show up occasionally, and then the barred U is the rounded version of that, but these are the symbols that you're going to want to use most often. And the very last thing we want to mention before I take questions is diphthongs. So you may have noticed that there are some vowels in English that I didn't make when I was giving you examples of all of these vowels. That's because in English we use a lot of diphthongs, and all a diphthong is 2 vowel sounds smushed together. So you transition from one vowel to the other vowel kind of within a single vowel sound. So for example, we don't have A as a vowel in English. We have A. So you start here and then you move either to the I or the E depending on the speaker. And the way that we represent that is just by putting the 2 vowel symbols next to each other, and then we put a little symbol underneath the one that's less important. So for the vowel A, we would think of that as an A vowel. That's the one that's more important. The second vowel that we move to is less important. So if we wrote A as a diphthong, we would put a little semicircle symbol. It's a non-syllabic diacritic for those of you that care, to represent that this is the main vowel in this diphthong and this is the secondary one. So, like I said, we have a lot of diphthongs in English. We have O, I, I can't remember. A, I, ow, O, several of them. So one of the things that we have to be careful of as singers is that we naturally will sing diphthongs in a lot of places where they're not supposed to be. So practicing, honestly, just practicing moving between the different vowels in the vowel chart is a really helpful exercise for helping you listen to whether you're kind of mixing them together into a diphthong, or if you're able to kind of separate them and move from one to the other cleanly. If you find that helpful, it may also help you remember the symbol for the different vowel sounds. So if you move down the unrounded front vowels, you go E, I, E, A, keeping them nice and separate. That might help you remember the symbols. Okay, let me see. I don't think that on the official IPA chart, there are not diphthongs represented, unfortunately. So, yes. But you should be able to figure out what a diphthong is. Oh, one more thing I was going to say, another diacritic that's super helpful for vowels is the nasalization diacritic, and this is just a tilde. So if we take our A vowel again, and we put a tilde above it, that means nasalization. So all those times in French where you're told to don't actually make the nasal, but you sing this vowel in a funny way, that's what that is. In French, a lot of the nasals just dropped out, but they left their nasalization behind on the neighboring vowels. So regular A is like this, A like that. With your velum open, so there's air coming through your nasal cavity, is a nasalized A. So that diacritic is really helpful for representing things if you are singing French in particular. Okay, so we have like 6 minutes for questions. Nope, we have 3 minutes for questions, I lie. Any questions about vowels or anything from last time as well?
In terms of applying these IPAs, for example, let's say if we go back to the Mendelssohn, if, let's say I don't know how to pronounce, or I forgot how to pronounce the word frohlockend, like how would I represent it in IPA symbols, or how do I mark it for myself?
Yeah, so I usually, when I'm marking IPA in my scores, I will usually just mark the IPA symbol of anything that's different than how I would pronounce it in English above the word. So let me zoom in a whole bunch so you can actually see this. So for uns, I put the vowel above it. And then for frohlocken, I put the O and then the A. I know that's hard to see because it's in pencil. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to transcribe the entire word in IPA because like the F, you're going to pronounce that like you normally would an F. That's not different, but anything that stands out to you as different, if you can identify what that sound is supposed to be, you can use the symbol to help you remember that's what that vowel is supposed to be. And like with the fricative thing that I mentioned before, an Ewigkeit, so I put a V above the W to remind me, and then, like I said, I believe that's a palatal fricative, so fun symbol that we didn't look at the other day, but that's a palatal fricative. But hopefully, as singers, if you can figure out how you are articulating a particular sound based on how someone's trying to get you to say it, and you can figure out kind of where in your mouth that's being articulated and what type of sound that is, you can go to the IPA chart and use those things to help you figure out what the symbol is. You can also always ask me. I'm happy to answer IPA questions anytime. Any other questions?
Daniel asked a great question last week. Singer's friend, you can chip in, that would be great. So Daniel asked if there are any websites that do IPA transcription for I guess it's some of the vocal standard. Daniel, you can clarify a question if, so if anybody knows any resources, please share it. I know that there are books that transcribes vocal standards, so go to the library, but usually, I don't know about like Trinity, if we have it in the library. I know that some of the library, they have it, but they're only for reference, like you can't really borrow the book, you have to like, you can only read it in the library, that kind of thing. But if you have any resources, feel free to share it among the friends. Good. Thanks, Hannah, for 2 great lectures. Like, these are super helpful. If you are like a chorus singer or a solo singer, I would encourage